We've learned how to take a quadratic equation. We've learned how to graph that quadratic equation. Okay, and we've learned how to identify the zeros or the roots of each quadratic equation, right? We look at our x-intercept. And we figure out, okay, whatever the x value is there, then those are the roots to my equation, to my quadratic equation. And usually it's some x value where the y value is always equal to 0. Hence why we also call our roots zeros. Okay, we also learned how to take a quadratic equation, and if I give you the roots, can you prove that those are the roots to the equation by plugging them in and seeing if you plug it in, does the equation give you a value of 0? Now, another way or something else that we can use to find what those values are if we don't have a graph and we have to do it algebraically is by using what we call the quadratic formula. Okay, now the quadratic formula is just another way that we can figure out what these numbers are, where we can figure out what these roots or what these zeros or solutions to this quadratic equations are, without a graph or without using our strategy of using the table. So what you're going to be doing today throughout your task is you're going to be solving these quadratic equations. You're going to be looking for these values over here without a graph, without your table, but using the quadratic formula. Okay, and this is the way you do it. So the quadratic formula looks like what we have over here in blue. Okay, simply we're looking for specific x values. We're looking for these x values that we have over here by following a certain formula. So here are the steps for you guys to do this. Now the first step says make sure that your equation is in standard form. So if my equation is in standard form, that means it looks like this: ax squared plus bx plus c, okay, where the other side is just simply equal to 0. Okay, because again we want our y values to be 0. So we have this in standard form, so that's the first thing we need. So if we're looking at this equation, x squared minus 15 is equal to 2x, I can already tell that this is not in standard form because I need one side of my equation to be equal to 0. So I can do a bunch of things to do that. I can either move this to the other side so that I have nothing on the left, or I can either move this to the other side so I have nothing on the right. But one of your sides have to be empty. One of your sides has to be equal to 0. So if we look at this equation one more time, the easiest thing to do here, and it might change in every question when you have to get one side equal to 0, is to just, since there's only one thing we have to move here, then the easiest thing to do is just move that 2x to the other side. So this 2x is a positive 2x. So in order, this is step 1 by the way, so in order to move that 2x to the other side, all I have to simply do is subtract 2x. Now if one side of your equation is already equal to 0, then you don't have to do this step, then you can skip this step. This is only when your equation is not equal to 0. So this is going to give me 0 over here, and on this side I'm going to write it in standard form. So I have x squared, then I'm going to bring down the next thing with the variable, which is negative 2x, and then I'm going to bring down my negative 15. So now I have an equation that is in this form. Okay, some number times x squared plus some other number times x plus some other number. Now I'm going to go ahead and do step 2. So far my equation is equal to 0. So again, if they give you an equation that's already equal to 0, then you do not have to do this step. Now step 2, I need to be able to identify what my a is, I need to know what my b is equal to, and I need to know what my c is equal to. And simply I'm just going to look at my equation. So I'm going to color this just to make it a little more clear. So my a is going to be in red, my b is going to be in orange, and my c is just simply going to be in blue. Okay, so my a is the number next to the x squared, right? You can see it right here is the number next to the x squared, so my a here is 1. My b is the number next to the x without the square, so my b here is -2, right over here. And my c is just simply the constant, the number that doesn't have the variable, so in this case, -15. So all I did was look at my equation and identify what's my A, what's my B, and what's my C. And you include whatever the symbol that comes before it is. So if it's a positive, if it's a plus, then it's a positive number. If it's a -2x, then it's a -2. Or like if it's a -15, then it's a -15. You don't want to ignore those negative signs. Now that I know what my A, my B, and my C are, I'm going to go ahead and substitute it into the equation that I have here. So I have x is equal to, because again, I'm looking for what these x values are. I'm looking to see if I were to graph this equation over here, I want to know what are these numbers, what are my intercepts without looking at the graph and without looking at the table. Okay, you have to do this for all these problems today. So I have x equals -b plus or minus, now, and I'll show you what that means in a minute, the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. This looks very scary the first time you see it, and trust me, it's always the same when you see this for the first time, so you're not alone on this, okay? Once you start practicing these problems over and over again, and once you do a bunch of these, you're gonna see that this is not gonna look as scary. It's still pretty long. It's still sort of a long process. We can't do anything about that. But the more you practice it, the more, some people even at the end of the year, last year, even had this equation memorized. So the more practice you do, the more this will become familiar and easier for you guys to identify. So now I'm going to go ahead and substitute in the values that I have. So I have x equals negative. That negative must always be there. Even if your b is negative or positive, you always have to have that extra negative on the outside. So I have negative b, which is -2, okay, plus or minus the square root of b, which is -2 squared, minus 4 times a, which in this case is 1, times c, which in this case is -15. Okay, and that thing is all under the square root. Okay, -2 squared minus 4 times 1 times -15 is all under the square root. And again, if you're confused as to where I'm getting these numbers from, they're just the numbers that are on my equation next to the different things that are a part of it. Over, right? That's important. You're always gonna have a big fraction over 2 times my a, which in this case is 1. So now, here's what you're going to do. This plus or minus over here, that means that you're gonna do this 2 times. Okay, that means that first you're going to do this with a plus. Okay, so in your calculator you're going to put x equals -2 plus the square root of -2 squared. I'm just rewriting it, over 2 times 1. And then when you do that, you're going to do it again, but you're also going to, now instead of with a plus, you're going to do it, oops, see how I already did that mistake right there? Don't make that same mistake I just did. And then once you do with the plus, you're going to go ahead and go back and redo it again with the minus. So you have -2 minus 2 minus the square root of -2 squared minus 4 times 1 times -15 over 2 times 1. And you're going to put those things in your calculator. So now I'm going to show you how do you put those in your calculator. So on your calculator, here's how you put what you wrote on your paper on your calculator. First, you want to just get out of y equals if you're in y equals, so second quit, or just close and reopen your app. Okay, and now the first thing you're always going to start with is a fraction. So you're going to click on alpha, this green button over here, and then you're going to go ahead and click on n/d. That's for numerator / denominator. Okay, and now on the top, you're going to put exactly what you have written down on your paper. And be careful because it's very easy for you to make a mistake. So just take your time when you're doing that. So I have negative parentheses, -2, close my parentheses, plus square root. To get the square root, if you look under alpha where it says x squared, right next to x squared to the left, you're going to see the square root symbol. So you're going to press second x squared and the square root will come out. So again, second x squared right under, 4 buttons under, and your square root is going to come out. And now you're going to put parentheses, -2, close parentheses, squared, minus 4, parentheses 1, open another parentheses, -15, close your parentheses, and now you're going to go to the bottom of your fraction. So you can either use your arrows, these blue arrows that you have over here, or you can tap on it using your finger. And now I'm going to go ahead and put in the bottom of my fraction. So I have 2 parentheses 1. Okay, now that I double check, I make sure that all my negatives are where they're supposed to be, that my minuses, the symbol before the 4, always make sure that it's a minus. A lot of people tend to put negative there, which is not correct. So it's a -4. I check that everything is correct, and I'm going to press enter. So I got 5. When I did it with the plus sign, I got 5. So on my paper, I'm going to go ahead and where I had where I have my equation set up with the plus, I'm just going to put x is equal to 5. And I'll show you guys in a minute what I mean by that. Now, remember that I have to do this twice. I have to do this with a negative sign. Okay, so you can either just redo the same thing, go to alpha, press n/d, and put in just everything the same way but with a negative sign, or the other thing you can do, but you have to be very careful because it might actually make you do double the work, is I can actually just click on what I've previously written. So I'm going to click on this big thing, my big fraction that I have here, the -2 plus -2 squared, blah, 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 blah. I'm actually just going to tap it with my finger, and it's just going to appear on a new line. So I have the exact same thing. The only thing that I have to change is a negative. So all I have to do is, with my arrows, I'm going to go up, or I'm going to go up. I'm going to go right before the plus, not after, because it's going to mess up your whole thing. You're going to go right before the plus. You're going to delete the plus, and you're simply going to add a minus. Okay, make sure you go before the plus. If you go after, it's going to mess up the whole thing. So you're going to delete the plus, put a minus there instead, press enter, and now you get your other answer for x using the minus instead of the plus. So on our papers then, the values that we get here, those are the values that we got for x. So we have x is equal to 5 and x is equal to -3. So those are your solutions to this quadratic equation. Those are the roots to this quadratic equation. And basically we just did a whole lot of work to find what we've already learned how to find before on our graph, right? So if this were, you don't have this on your paper, but if you were to graph the equation that you were working with right now, right, and you look at where the equation intersects, where the graph of the equation intersects the x-axis, you will see that it intersects at -3, 0, and 5, 0, which is the same thing that we got. And also, if I were to go to the table for this equation, you would see that if I'm looking for the zeros in the y, you would see that you would find the point -3, 0, and 5, 0, which is the same thing that we got again using the quadratic formula.